former President Trump is facing a new type of legal challenge. 6 voters in Colorado filing a lawsuit Wednesday seeking to remove him from the state's election ballots. The suit says in part, quote, 4 years after taking an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution as President of the United States, Trump tried to overthrow the results of the 2020 election by instigating this unprecedented assault on the American constitutional order. Trump violated his oath and disqualified himself under the 14th Amendment from holding public office, including the office of the president. Vaughn Hillyard joins us now live from Rapid City, South Dakota, where the former president will be tomorrow. Vaughn, this is referring to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is from the post-Civil War era. It says in part, I'm going to read it here for our viewers, no person shall hold any office, civil or military, who having previously taken an oath as an officer of the U.S. to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. Okay, so Vaughn, a lot of history there, a lot of legalese for our viewers. Break it down for us. Is there a solid argument in this lawsuit?
Right. This is legitimate federal statute that ultimately the courts will have to decide on. And this would obviously be expedited. One Secretary of State suggested to me this could go to the U.S. Supreme Court. In this case, this was a lawsuit that was filed in federal circuit court in Colorado. So there could be a potential ruling from a judge. It could go to an appeal. It could reach the U.S. Supreme Court potentially. Of course, what the disqualification clause says is that it prevents somebody who engaged in rebellion or insurrection from holding or seeking public office, but it also prevents somebody who provided aid and comfort to those who partook in insurrection or rebellion from also seeking office. Of course, Donald Trump has only been charged with crimes related to the January 6th attack and an attempt to interfere in the 2020 election, but he has not been found guilty in the court of law, and so that is where ultimately a judge would have to determine the extent to which Donald Trump may or may not qualify for a ballot in these states.
So they essentially have to wait to see how these cases, both at the federal level and in Georgia, play out?
That's a question that ultimately the judge will have to determine. The voters in this particular lawsuit in Colorado contend that it is imperative that the Secretary of State in Colorado remove his name from the ballot. There is nothing in statute that says one has to be found guilty of a crime of insurrection, but that is where, because this really, there's such little precedent to this, that it's really open to interpretation, potentially from a federal judge, Tom.
How is the former president responding to this?
His words today in an interview this afternoon were nonsense, suggesting that those who engaged in insurrection were actually those who rigged, in his words, the 2020 election. And so for Donald Trump, he said this is a continuation of election interference of the 2024 election, one that he has suggested the only way that he can be beat is by taking him off the ballot and by keeping him from ultimately seeking the White House again.
And the goal here is not just Colorado, right? There's similar efforts in other states?
Right, and some key swing states, including Arizona, who the Secretary of State in Arizona I talked to just this last week, and he said he is awaiting potentially lawsuits to come because they have to go and print out the ballots. And in the role of Secretary of State, it's their job to simply go through the process of putting names of those who qualify. It's not for them to determine who is qualified for the ballot or not, and that is really where we have not seen large precedent. In New Mexico last year, Tom, there was a county commissioner that a state judge ruled had to be removed from the ballot. But then in Arizona last year, there was another state judge who determined that 3 members of Congress in Arizona could not be removed under this statute. So it's open for interpretation from judges here. And I think this lawsuit out of Colorado is just the beginning. You
know, Vaughn, I know you're not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to make a call about the weight or the value of this lawsuit. But who essentially defends this lawsuit, or who defends himself? Does the Trump campaign have to fight this?
This is ultimately going to, it's a very good question. In real time here, Tom, I think that is, if you're talking about Trump world here, they have a number of indictments that they're currently trying to work through. So I think it would be a question here in the case of Colorado. You have a Democratic Secretary of State. This lawsuit was filed on behalf of 2 unaffiliated voters, Republican voters. I think there are question marks here about whether Trump needs to seek his own counsel to defend himself or not.
All right, Vaughn Hillyard. I threw you a legal curveball there. You did a great job with it. Vaughn Hillyard on the campaign trail, in the courts, everywhere when it comes to campaign 2024. We appreciate all your reporting, Vaughn.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.